Welcome to this bonus episode of Insights with Marcia. And once again, it's our very special guest, Drew Forsberg. And so we just thank you for being here, Drew. The interview we had earlier was fascinating. And I know you have some really other good scoop and things that people would like to learn. So the first question I have for you is my first question. Tell us about a mission. What's it like? What do they I've seen too much James Bond episodes, I can hear the James Bond music and they're in a canoe kind of thing or boat, and then they get and they're underwater and they've got their guns and they're going in a secret cave. And I know that's a little over the top, but give us an idea of what a mission's like.
Typical mission that we're training for now is house raids, village raids, as in like you want to come in and sneak up on your enemy in the middle of the night while they're still sleeping. So that's a lot easier in maybe like an urban environment than you think it is, but in a rural environment, then it's like, okay, you got to worry about dogs that are going to be waking up and who else is out there. And you don't want the helicopters to wake everybody up. So one of the harder missions that we'll practice for a lot would be like an Afghanistan type mission where the helicopter would drop you off about 10 miles out. You'll walk all night and then make sure that everyone's kind of like set up. You'll not take a breath, but after you walk all those miles, then you'll have to set up your ladders or whatever the case is, all the other tools in order to get inside of that village and do what's called a target assault. As always with night vision, we're very particular in the SEAL teams about being very, very quiet as we can be as like little ninjas, so that even if there's shots fired, you immediately still want to like stop talking as soon as possible, because maybe the enemy knows that you're there now, but he doesn't know exactly where you are, and he doesn't know exactly when to start shooting if everyone maintains that discipline of being quiet. So that's kind of what we train for the most, is like, all right, how the most difficult thing in the entire world would be, to raid a village in the middle of the night and keep quiet. If you can do that well, then everything else kind of follows. So that's kind of what a lot of the missions would look like in Afghanistan. Iraq, very similar. Maybe you're using trucks, maybe you're not walking as far, but that's kind of what you're always training for, and that's what you're hoping to do. But then there's other missions that aren't as glamorous, and they're not exactly what you train for. When I was in Africa on my deployment in 2014, we had a mission where there was a civil war that broke out in South Sudan. So South Sudan with another civil war. And we were up in Djibouti. There were some very, humanitarian type camps down there with some Americans and British and Australians. And they wanted to get them out of there and get them out before this, civil war kind of spilled into these humanitarian camps. And so we looked at all the intel, and we knew that, like usual, these people are fighting in the day. So they're usually pretty quiet at night. So we put up our mission, like me and my officer, we're the ones that plan everything. So we planned exactly how we're going to get there, what time we're going to get there, and how we're going to quietly go through this humanitarian village and just quietly knock on doors and say, hey, we're here. I'm going to quote the Navy SEAL Charlie Sheen movie. We're a SEAL team. We're here to get you out. Load them up in the helicopters and then leave. The helicopters we had are what's called Ospreys. So they're kind of like the airplanes that also transition into a helicopter mode. So we had those. We were all ready for that mission. And the commanding general of Africa was like, no, you're not going to do it that way. Okay. How are we going to do it, sir? Well, you're going to do it first thing in the morning. You guys are going to leave here and you'll get to the target area and just basically do the same thing. And if you get shot at, you're just going to leave. All right, well, I don't really want to do it in the day. These ospreys are not exactly friendly looking birds in the air, especially to Africans in the middle of a civil war. If they were white painted, UN helicopters, that might be one thing, but they're not. So I think this is a really bad idea. I'm like, well, you're going to do it anyway. And our commanding officer was in the United Arab Emirates, and we were like, sir, we don't think we should do this. And he's like, well, I don't care. I want you to do it anyway. Because again, what's he looking for? He's looking for that promotion. And so if his guys get on this mission, then it's good for him. So we're like, all right, guys, plans changed. Instead of going tomorrow night, we're going tomorrow morning. Get your stuff, try to get a good night's sleep, and we'll be out in the airfield, early in the morning. So we fly 3 hours from Djibouti, Africa, all the way down to South Sudan. Everything is pretty quiet. We're in three different ospreys spread out. And right before we got to the area where the humanitarian camp was, we got a call that said, hey, everything is quiet, all conditions normal. And the officer in charge for my platoon, he was like, well, hey, pilots, I don't really care. I still want you to do what's called a flyover. So still circle it, and then we'll come in. I don't care that we're going this way and everything is fine. Still circle it. So they're like, okay. So they circled it. And on their circle, we started getting shot at. So we were still thankfully in airplane mode, but 50 cal machine guns and everything else was kind of like coming up through the floor and kind of like, whoa, whoa, the floor's exploding. So we're like, all right, abort the mission. I guess we're leaving. I'm not sure when these, other people will get out of this humanitarian camp, but now we have to leave. So we're moving and I'm up on my radio. I'm in the middle bird. And so we're calling bird one. Okay, how is everybody? Did anybody get hurt? No one's hurting my bird. No one's hurting the third bird, but bird one is not getting back to us. I know they're flying because we can see them through the windshield of our airplane. So they're still flying. They're smoking all of our engines. All the birds are shot, but we're able to at least continue flying. So that was good. But we weren't hearing anything back from our guys. Finally, one of them came up on the radio and it was like, all right, we've got 3 SEALs that are shot. The leader that I had, the guy right underneath me, who was the leader of that bird, he wasn't coming up on the radio because he was shot and he was unconscious. 2 other guys had through and throughs, like shot through the leg, up in the upper thigh, and they were doing okay. And there was 3 other SEALs in there that were not shot, so it was at least a 1-to-1 ratio. The leader was also one of the medics, so I had 2 medics in that bird. So one medic is now down and he's unconscious, but I've got one medic who should be fine, plus 2 other guys to help him. So, all right, it's all right. We've trained for this. We can't go back to Djibouti. That's 3 hours back the other way. Our medevac plan was the next spot we can safely land is in Uganda, which is an hour and a half away. We can't stop. We can't land the birds. We can't reshuffle. We can't do anything for the next hour and a half except pray that everything will be okay. I had no idea how bad it was in that first bird because, yes, all the engines on all the birds are smoky, but theirs was like caustic inside. So they're flying and limping, and they've got one guy that's unconscious. 2 other guys are bleeding out. They put on tourniquets for the through and throughs. And when we finally land in Uganda, right before I had a medic in my bird that was like, hey, we should probably do a walking blood bank, meaning like the guy who's unconscious, what blood type is he? Does anybody else in this bird have that same blood type? I was O positive. The wounded guy was O positive. So he took blood from me and another guy. So that he had, bags of blood so that he could do a transfusion when we got on the deck in Uganda. So we land finally in Uganda. We've got some people waiting for us. They know we're coming in. They know we've got wounded. And the one guy who was unconscious got his blood transfusion. The 2 other guys came out. One was just shot. He was fine. But the other one was screaming like crazy. And I was like, that's weird. This guy named James, he's my toughest new guy. My favorite new guy. He was older and he was like the most physical stud of a specimen that we had. And he was really screaming and he had what's called 2 lollipops. They're like morphine lollipops that give him a slow drip. So he's got 2 in his mouth and he's still screaming. This is supposed to deal with the pain for anything. Like, that is really weird. I don't know what to do here. But we're told, okay, these guys are going to land now in Uganda and we're going to put them on another plane and get them to Nairobi, Kenya, where they can go to a full-blown hospital. But at least they're going to get treatment. So when we're in Uganda and we make the call to our commanding officer, again, is all the way in United Arab Emirates, and he's aware, and he's like, hey, I need you to consolidate your force and get back to Djibouti as soon as possible for follow-on missions. And me and the officer are like, there's not going to be any follow-on missions. These birds that we took here aren't taking off for months. They need to get repaired here. We're glad to be here. There's a jet that can take us back to Djibouti, but we can't do any follow-on missions. I've got 3 wounded, and I want to like give all of my medics with all of our wounded to help take them to Kenya. And the commanding officer was like, "Nope, you're not doing that. You're going to send the one guy who's been treating them for the last hour and a half. He will go with them to Kenya, but nobody else is." And that was like heartbreaking because I had to tell my medics who are eager to get in there and help with everything that, sorry guys, you're not going. We're all going back to Djibouti, and just one guy is going back with them. The same guy that's been breathing in caustic air for the last 90 minutes. So we have to go back to Djibouti. Those guys who go over to Kenya, again, the one guy is now unconscious. The one guy with 2 lollipops in his mouth. Well, when we touched down in Uganda and they could see that he's still in a lot of pain, somebody, not from our unit, somebody in Uganda came up with ketamine. That's a drug to also kind of like help subside some pain. Well, he gave him, instead of 10 milligrams, he gave him 100, which put him into shock. So it knocked him out unconscious. So now we've got 2 unconscious guys going to Kenya, and one with a hole in his leg and only 1 medic. Oh, but they're gonna have a crew in the bird, and they'll take care of them. Okay, I mean, I don't think this is a good idea, and it bothers me, being a military guy, it's supposed to be decisions like this made at the lowest level. And so when we had a general telling us, "I don't care about your plan, I know better," that's usually not a good sign. And now we've got a commanding officer that's saying, "I don't care what your plan is, I know better." So those guys went to Kenya, the four of them. 2 are now unconscious. The medic does all the turnover with all the hospital guys and everything else. And they're like, "Hey, well, how are you?" to the medic. And he's like, "Well, I this kind of hurts back here. I don't know." And he had been shot also. So we actually took 4 wounded, not just 3. They have to deal with the one guy that's now unconscious because of a ketamine overdose. And by the time they finally looked at that guy with the ketamine overdose with his leg, it was all ate up. Meaning what had happened was the reason he was screaming so much was because the tourniquet wasn't on tight enough. So what happens is the blood flow from the artery continues to go into the leg, but it can't exit because there's no vein to let it go. So it blows up like a balloon. So the next day, he was an above the knee amputee because nobody was able to assess his tourniquet for 8 hours because, again, we only had, 90 minutes, not a big deal. But all of those other hours that went afterwards because he was unconscious because of the ketamine overdose, and we didn't have any other medics to just reassess and retreat because all the other medic talent, my main guy was going to the first guy who went unconscious. Now this guy's an above the knee amputee. So that's always gonna bother me, like looking at the leadership and them not taking any responsibility for what happened. We got back to Djibouti, and the commanding general of all of Africa was like, "Hey, I wanna meet with those guys." Okay, we hung around for a little while. He was late, then he was 15 minutes late, then he was a half hour late, and the guy that we're reporting to was like, "Alright, the general's late for his own meeting that he wanted to have with you guys, then you don't have to be here." So, he never took any accountability for it. The commanding officer for SEAL Team 3 still got promoted. Uh, no, nothing bad on him, I guess. So this started to really seed some seeds of cynicism for my upper chain of command. So that was a mission gone bad that I'll share. That was really unfortunate, still unfortunate. That one guy who was a total stud in my platoon. This was his first mission, his first deployment. He'd just gotten done with sniper school. Now he's an above the knee amputee. He's a great surfer. Can't surf again. And, then you're on meds, and then you have to self-medicate as they try to drain you off. So he went down a pretty bad downward spiral for a number of years, all because some senior leaders thought they knew better than us on the ground. So that's always gonna kinda be heartbreaking when I look back on my career.
Definitely. But everybody else lived?
Everyone else is fine. Yeah.
Good, good. I mean,
The
not
the
discounting
medic
anything.
treated one guy. We gave him a silver star for, treating all those wounded guys for all those hours, not even realizing that he was wounded himself. But yeah, the one guy that was shot unconscious right in the beginning, recovered. He joined us later on in deployment. So the other guy with the hole in his leg, they just needed a couple of months, and they were able to join us back for the rest of our deployment.
Wow. So these senior leaders that are given the orders, they're Navy SEALs, is that right?
The commanding general of Africa was not, but the commanding officer of SEAL Team 3 was a SEAL.
Why do you think that is happening?
Well, I think back to what we talked about earlier with how do you get promoted inside the military? The higher you get promoted and then the higher you exit, the better of a, cushy job you can get in the military industrial complex as a paid contractor or as advisor or whatever the case is afterwards. So the desire inside the military generally is to get promoted. All right, and how do you get promoted as an officer? You need numbers at the end of your tour, what got accomplished while you were in charge. So doing a non-combatant evacuation is kind of a big deal. So those don't happen very often. So this is why he was like, I don't care what it takes for you to do this mission. You're going to do it no matter what. Because that would make him stand out from other commanding officers who were leading guys doing house raids in Afghanistan. This would be, something, a good feather in his cap, so to speak.
Gotcha. Unlike Drew Forsberg, who was willing to give it all away 6 months before his 20-year mark because it wasn't the right thing. We need more Drews. We need a lot more Drews out there. If your children one day listen to this podcast, what do you hope they'll take away from your stand for faith and freedom?
I hope the big thing that they understand that I'm always trying to drill into them is just the importance of servant leadership. Inside the SEAL teams, you get introduced very early in buds of this concept of team fear, team first. So team gear, then your gear, and then you. You're not going to go shower after a cold night of working on boats in the ocean until all the boats gets rinsed off and all the trucks get put away. That's team gear, all the radios. And then you've also got your gear. Your wetsuit needs to get washed. All your gear needs to get rinsed off. Everything gets taken care of before you go and take yourself a shower and put yourself in some warm, comfy pajamas. Now, maybe there's some guy that showed up with burritos while you're rinsing off boats, but nevertheless, like, you're not putting on comfy pajamas until all the other stuff is squared away. So we're big on that. We're out here in Hawaii, so when we come back from the beach, we're hungry, we're tired, and it's like, I don't care. First things first, we're unloading the truck, put away all the surfboards, hang up all the towels, and then you will hang up your bathing suit. And if I see your bathing suit in a clump, in a pile, while you put on dry clothes, there's going to be, you're going to have to answer for it. So that part of team gear first, team first, no one's finished until everyone's finished. Oh, I got my job done. Well, your brother hasn't. So now you need to go help your brother. So that, I think, all plays into servant leadership. No matter who you are, no matter where you are on the totem pole, you're constantly looking out for everybody so that when you are in charge, your default, your training all comes back to, how do I serve others? And when Proverbs says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he should not depart from it. There's many things that I'm training them up, but one of them is servant leadership of no one's done until everyone is done.
Mhm. You kind of answered, but you may want to add more to it. What wisdom would you give to parents raising children today?
Definitely focusing on that proverb of to train up a child in the way he should go and breaking down those words. Okay, it's to train. It's not to discipline. You're not trying to like beat them into submission, but that's a tool, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to train them and get them to just do the right thing. Even if they don't understand why, they're going to do it. And that's all comes down to training. Everything I do is looking at it from the lens of how am I training them for later? When they grow up, if I let them get away with this, I'm enabling them and that's training them to do this in the future, to be selfish, to be lazy, whatever the case is. So I'm always trying to look for those opportunities of training them because in the end state, I want them to be fully capable human beings, moms, dads, husbands, fathers, leaders. I want them to be able to serve the Lord in whatever capacity he calls them to. So everything that I'm doing now should be a life skill for that later end state. And it's not about me. Like, I'd rather not deal with it. But again, servant leadership means I don't care about what I want. It's for the betterment of the team. It's for the betterment of them. If I take the extra step into making sure that they get a training value out of everything that we're doing.
But I love that. I love that. It's what's gonna make powerful people through life, servant leadership. That's great. So what is there something about the Navy SEALs that nobody knows?
Well, I think we touched on the fact that we run the entire organization. Then really the Navy well, pretty much puts a name tag and pays my paycheck. And we do everything. We work for SOCOM. So the Navy really doesn't have too much of their fingers over what we do. But at the end of the day, we're still getting a check. And so with training, if a guys were going out to train land warfare out in, Eastern California in the desert, all right, well, who are the trainers and who's going to get the bullets there and who's going to drive the trucks there and who makes sure that all the guns get out there? Setting up the ranges, making sure that all the bullets fly in the right area, like everything has got to be done by other SEALs who are in charge of training. We do that very purposefully so that when guys who are operators, they can just show up and train. But the trainers side of it are now all other SEALs. And that's a little bit different from what I understand with the Green Berets that I've worked with. It's like, oh, you and your platoon want to go out to such and such range and do land warfare. Well, the platoon that's going to do the training and get the training also has to set up everything. So that's a pretty big lift on all of them to set everything up. So how much training value are they getting out of it when they have to spend so much extra time on logistics? Whereas it's just a cycle for us. Like you do a couple of pumps at the team, and then you're going to go to a training detachment so that you're either going to be training the guys in land warfare or urban warfare or whatever the case is, or you go to a different side of the training house where you're an instructor for those kids who want to come through and become SEALs. So that's almost like the regular rotation of what else is there outside the SEAL platoons. You're going to do some platoon time. That's the whole reason that we're here, is to be SEALs in a SEAL platoon. But then you have to give back to the community right away by being a trainer in some regard.
And so when we talked about earlier about beyond the brotherhood, to me, that's even more positive training for being out there in America's workforce, in the corporate America or entrepreneurship. Y'all are hiring and firing people. You're making sure, like you said, the trucks are getting people to where you're going to go train and that kind of thing. So I have one more question for you, because you're obviously a very grounded person. Is there anything you do, say, on a daily basis to kind of keep you centered and grounded to be who Drew is today?
I do have a morning routine. I try to wake up early. And now that my body is getting older and breaks more often, I have to be very purposeful and intentional about stretching. So I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to have to wake up and stretch before I go surf or go to jujitsu class, what else should I be doing? Well, this is a really good time for me to get my Bible time in. Or even if I'm not reading the actual Bible because I'm busy doing a stretch, well, then I've also got pray.com that'll help me lead me through a prayer and lead me through a scripture and go through a Bible story. So at least I'm always getting some Bible in. I want to get my stretching in. I make sure that I drink plenty of water. So I have a really good morning routine to make sure that I can set aside some time for both me and, more importantly, for the Lord, between praying and getting into the scriptures a little bit to start my day off. That's kind of like how I stay grounded. In the SEAL teams, I I didn't start off as a Christian. I came in 2002 and then became a Christian December 18th, 2005, right after my first deployment. And I knew that this was going to be kind of a major shift for me. A lot of times I was around guys who were more like frat boys with guns as opposed to professional war fighters. And so I knew that was at odds with a Christian life, was a frat boy with a gun. So I really wanted to hone in on, all right, what is a biblical warrior and what does that look like? And when I really meditate on David, he had a bunch of misfits. He didn't have great upstanding individuals. And I think he was a great leader because he showed them how to follow the Lord, but that's because he put the Lord first. So that's the kind of leader that I would aspire to be. And I want to make sure that I'm putting him first.
That's really cool. I love that. I love that. Yeah, David is just an amazing example of that and what in every area of his life. Just amazing. Well, I can't even begin to thank you enough for being with us, and people are gonna love hearing your story. Have fun in Hawaii. Oh my gosh, and thank you for getting up. Did we start this at 6:30 your time, or was it earlier?
It was about 6:30, yes.
Well, thank you for getting up and being with us. And once again, beyondthebrotherhood.org if people wanna go to there, and if there's any executives or people that would like to hire former Navy SEALs, which I can't think of anything better. And so we just thank you for being here for this bonus session of Insights with Marcia, and I just wish you all the best.